go.
All right, no
So this
worries.
is
We're
like the
going.
first time we're doing it, so this is going to be really bad. But
I'm sure with time we'll get a lot more chill about it.
yeah, I mean, I can cut it down if needs be. So anyway, we're going to talk about hard and soft money, so the monetary system. Obviously, right now we're in a very soft money oriented system, which is actually, but it depends who you believe. But Randall Ray, for example, he postulates that tally sticks were used up until the 1850s, 1815 it was abandoned by Parliament, I believe. I don't know how true that is. I know it was somewhere in the early 1800s. And so we had a period of hard money between 1815 and about 1940. And World War One really killed hard money and brought back soft money. And
Yeah.
So my gripes with soft money are that it's inflationary, and that, I mean, a lot of people say, oh, it's bad because it isn't real. And my main issue is less that it's not that it's not real, it's more that it causes inflation and it causes this big sort of downstream economic effect, which I'll get into later.
Wait,
And so
question. What type of inflation? Because aren't some types of inflation good?
in what sense?
In the sense of during like really hard economic times, can't inflation be useful?
Okay, so you're taking like a Keynesian perspective, right? Where if you just spend and spend and spend, it can help the economy, but that does cause inflation. Yeah, so that's what I was getting to. So that's my other gripe with hard money, is that it really exacerbates sort of issues with, like, when you're in a recession, right? You can't take a Keynesian approach and sort of spend your way out of it without, massively exacerbating debt. Although, to the same extent, in a soft money system, we still use bonds, and we still use, we use quantitative easing, which is completely, fake. But that is another advantage of soft money. I mean, quantitative easing, I would say, is just horrible and bad for the economy. And I think, but like looking at it from a modern monetary theory approach, where the government having a monopoly on distributing and having the be all and end all of being able to print and take away money from an economy is a big advantage. But that can still work in a hard money system. It's just more difficult in terms of, like, you can't just print money or take money out of an economy, right? If we, for example, use Bitcoin, right? There's a set amount of Bitcoin. You can't print anymore. You can't, and you can't also reduce it unless, of course, the government just builds up a large surplus of Bitcoin. And then, so that reduces the amount flowing in the economy, or that's just savings in general, which, as I'm going to get to, is actually somewhat of a good thing. So carry on.
I was going to say, one of the biggest issues with soft money, not necessarily being what's the word, inflation, but more or less currency depreciation. Because, like you said, if inflation was tied roughly like hard money and it had a set value that kind of swayed, then it wouldn't be too bad. But with soft money, you get a lot of depreciation, and you just can't make that back. Without putting a lot of big issues and a lot of big things in place.
Yeah, and so that's the thing, right? So obviously inflation is a bad thing. It degrades purchasing power, and it causes, things like wage spiral, I forget the word for it, wage spiral inflation, where people, because of inflation, they demand a higher wage, and the higher wage causes people to spend more money because they have more disposable income, and then because of that, that causes inflation because there's more money circulating in the economy, and it just scales and scales and scales, right? So that's the other issue with that's the issue with inflation, right? But soft money certainly doesn't help because of the fact that, we can just print money in response to that. Obviously, we don't necessarily print money, but money circulates into the economy. It's quite hard to wrap your head around the fact that money just comes into the economy, right? It doesn't make sense. Sure, you can generate wealth through extracting things out of the ground, but to an extent, obviously, inflation continues to go up, no matter how much how much excess output we have in this system. By how it feels, inflation just continues to go up, and that's very much a Keynesian thing, right? Not blaming Keynes. Keynes didn't cause this system, but the fact that we have a soft money system that is caused by by Keynesian economics, where it's like, oh, just spend, 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 spend. It keeps pumping money into the economy, and inevitably, this is the point I hinted at earlier, and I'm getting to now, is that because we just keep spending, we have this phenomenon, which we spoke about this a year or two ago. BS jobs, bullshit jobs.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So what Luke Smith postulates, which I find, he is quite a controversial guy. He's very interesting.
Wait, what does he say that's controversial?
He's very much he's like a very orthodox Christian, and he very much sticks to his beliefs. I remember watching one video, and he talks about how being gay is a sin and that's. I separate the man from the idea, okay? And maybe this isn't just his idea, but I've heard it from him, from his video called the economy's fake, the money is fake, the jobs are fake, or it's those three words. But so what he argues is that because we have a soft money system, and we have inflation, because we have inflation, we're incentivized to consume, and we just consume, and this is also like a minimalist argument, or like you can argue it's a bit philosophical. So because we're incentivized to consume because of inflation, there's absolutely no reason to save because of inflation.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying. Yeah. So because of that, we just consume, and this is supplementing the BS jobs, the bullshit jobs. It's basically making it so that in like reality, we don't need these jobs at all, but we do need these jobs because we need to produce this useless service that people are consuming, and we need to pay people wages. And why do we need to pay people wages? Because if we aren't consistently paying people wages, they're going to become flat out broke. They're not going to be able to consume anymore, and the economy is just going to halt. And yeah, this is the other thing I'm getting to. I don't know your question, so just hold it for a second. Is that you can go against inflation. How do you go against inflation? By stocks, by bonds, by assets. What does this do? This inflates stocks. This inflates assets. Inflating stocks, we're not gonna necessarily have the exact same, but .com bubble crash, the Great Depression was a huge stock crash. Because people are living in the stock market, the Great Depression stock market crash wasn't actually because of soft money, but soft money certainly does it, right? The fact that people have to buy things to avoid inflation means that these things that they're buying are being inflated in price. People are buying stocks, which inflates in price, which makes us more prone to stock market crashes. People are buying assets, which obviously is inflated. Gold has shot up massively, and that's most likely a big soft money thing. It isn't only a soft money thing. Gold went up in price during a hard money system, but that's the difference. When we had a hard money system, it was gold that was backing up the money. So actually gold going up benefited people and made it so they didn't have to buy assets, and therefore meant that we weren't inflating the price of these assets, so they were still affordable. Housing's a really, really, really good example. Landlordism, yes, has been caused by wealth inequality to an extent, and yes, has been caused by deregulating it to an extent, but also the fact that people need to buy a house and then rent it to people or sell it off for a greater return in order to beat inflation, right? It is causing the massive inflation in house prices. And in a hard money system, it wouldn't necessarily be true. And in fact, in a hard money system, obviously people are going to be incentivized to save because they're not, they don't have to consume and worry about their savings being eaten up, or they don't have to put it in assets. And therefore, because your savings actually accrue value, you don't have to invest it in assets, but you can just sit on your money and then buy a house when you need to. You can ask your question.
Well, I had a couple of questions while you're speaking. The first one was on about the bullshit jobs. Normally, the reason we have bullshit jobs is because we need people to be able to provide value, and with a job market that's so volatile, it can change so rapidly. It's hard. I can imagine it'd be really hard to get everyone to do something valuable, and so it's just filler. Could you actually imagine, or is there? Have you seen a rebuttal against, how would we then replace bullshit jobs?
So
you know what I mean?
So actually, what Luke Smith says, and I somewhat agree, but I also have I actually have two other answers. So the first thing, what Luke Smith says is that in a system where you can just not necessarily live off of your savings, but your savings accrue interest, we could have a system where we have massive unemployment. So we remove all the bullshit jobs, and suddenly there's only a set amount of jobs. But now, because of that, we can basically flood the actual working people with massively high wages, and the people who aren't working are either clearly too young, or they're younger than 20, or they're older than 30. But the people younger than 20 are being paid for by their parents or whatever, and the people older than 30 have worked in this prime time to get money and get paid, and then can live off of the savings, which are accruing value. And naturally, because the money's accruing value, they can live off of that, and they don't have to buy assets and mess everyone else up. And that's his argument. My other argument is, I mean, this isn't I don't necessarily believe in this, but as AI becomes more and more and more advanced, we're edging more and more to a post-work society, you know? So very, very soon, we're already seeing it. AI is replacing entry-level jobs. And robotics are also going to very quickly start replacing manufacturing. Obviously, this is going to be very energy intensive. And so that's the big issue. But, I mean, at some point, you have robots building all the power plants. You have, you have robots mining all the resources. So I mean, not soon. I can maybe in the next 20 to 30 years, even that's slightly optimistic in my view, although other people say we have AGI next year, and it's like, what? But so yeah, arguably we're moving towards a post-work society where it's not even really an issue. But then we're getting into, I would say, post-scarcity economics, but I wouldn't say it's post-scarcity, because there's still scarcity of goods, but it's more like we don't have to work, so how do we divvy up the resources when no one has to work to earn the resources? So then,
I was gonna say,
yeah, so the grandfather of socialism makes this point. He says, not socialism, the grandfather of AI, he says the way to do this is socialism. And this is the other thing, though. Socialism, I mean, people see socialism and think soft money, because a lot of leftists are Keynesian or whatever, and they argue for a soft money system. But you can still have socialism with a hard money system. It just disincentivizes consumption, which isn't even necessarily a bad thing. Because consumption doesn't hugely benefit people, right? I mean, okay, if you're like a little child, maybe buying a new toy, which is consumption, is good. But when you're like 30-something buying Labubu's, I think it's questionable how much that consumption's actually benefiting your life. And sure, it's a hobby and it's things like that. But we also we have to face the truth, which is that we need degrowth to stop climate change, to stop all of these. To stop the waste dumping in the oceans and all of these big things. We need degrowth. And so how do you limit consumption? You incentivize it, not through fiscal policy. You just make it so the economy basically makes it so that you're rewarded for not consuming.
Has there been an example of that's been done before that you could relate this to?
As in, like, what? Monetary, like hard money systems reducing consumption?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's sort of difficult, right? Because the only time we've had hard money, as I said, was this golden age of economics between 1815 and 1914, where almost everyone used the gold standard. But to an extent, I may be wrong. If someone watches this, or if you think I'm wrong, then tell me. But like, were there BS jobs in the 1800s? Obviously, it was the Victorian period. It was massive wealth inequality, and that's a whole different thing, right? You need fiscal rules to reduce that. But we're talking purely monetary right now. And really, I feel like most jobs in that time were somewhat productive. They had some reason. And that isn't necessarily just because of the hard money system. There were less people, right? We didn't have a huge. We had what, at most 1 billion people, maybe 2 billion. I don't know the exact figures. I know. Hang on, let me. When did global population hit 2 billion? So 1927. So yeah, 1 billion people at most, maybe 1.5 billion, and so there was a lot less people. And I'm not arguing for population control. That's absolutely not what I'm arguing for. But what I'm more arguing for is that in a hard money system, it would reduce the bullshit jobs, and to an extent, the huge population we do have is supplemented by the bullshit jobs that we have, arguably because of soft money.
Question:
But yeah,
is a issue with hard money? I just kind of thought of like so as you know, people are irrational, markets are irrational. You can't necessarily always base things off of rationality.
of course, yeah.
In So let's say you got a free market that's based on hard money.
Yeah, well, I'm not
If
advocating for a free market, but a lot of that's an interesting thought experiment, because a lot of people arguing for hard money are pro free market. So yeah,
anyway, let's say okay, let's take us back to, let's say, 1890, but let's say we had the stock market, we had derivatives, everything like that. If we were based on a hard money system, wouldn't irrationality eventually lead us to like an incredibly illiquid market, and then banks and debtors and stuff like that become severely disadvantaged, and eventually just collapse? Is there not somewhat there has to be a soft
well,
money, not backup, but like a balance between them? Because solely hard money seems as if it would back you into a corner eventually,
see,
especially
that's the
with
thing though. See,
economic pressures and stuff.
okay, so we actually did, obviously, as I said, we had a hard money system between 1815 and 1914, roughly. And that was one of the biggest booms in the economy in history. This economic boom between 1815 and 1914 in a hard money system. So clearly people were motivated to make more capital. And so, like, I get what you're saying, right? It incentivizes people to save, but at the same time, you're always going to have entrepreneurs and risk takers who are not greedy, but you're going to want more money, right? You're going to want to, and this isn't in a purely free market system, right? So I'm entertaining you here. This isn't necessarily what I agree with, but I mean, Hayek says this, right? That this is the beauty of the free market system, is that there is no other system where someone from the lowest of lows has the opportunity to become vastly wealthy. Hugely rich. Sure, you can make the argument in a complete command economy communist system that people overall have a better living standard, but there is absolutely. I mean, you have to agree to an extent. There is really no other system where someone can be completely dirt poor, but somehow through whether that's luck or their own working ability, meritocracy. It's a possibility, right, to become vastly rich, which isn't, again, then you could also make the argument, is that a good thing? And then you're sort of getting into more politics and sociology and culture, but yeah.
On that then, like you said, one of the most amazing things about free market societies is that you can have that like fast advancement into wealth, but otherwise it would be really difficult. Isn't that one of the like main benefits of soft money, in terms of like you have such a higher flexibility in the market compared to hard money? Wouldn't that like improve a free market, so to speak, in the sense that kind of hard to describe, but it's would it not be easier in a soft money environment where you can deal with hardships not faster, but more in a more flexible way? Let's say with modern monetary policy, rather than a hard money policy, because like I said, we've talked about this before
A
actually.
Keynesian policy. Modern
Yeah,
monetary theory just says you can print money and it doesn't necessarily do anything bad. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
We've talked about this before with wealth inequality in a hard money system. Would it not become even more rigid, because well, the richer would accrue more wealth, more money, and then I'd say, what's the best way? The lower flow of money would be a lot harder then for people to, in a free market society, get wealth, that start from nothing and end up with loads of money. Like,
Yeah.
is
Well,
that not one of the main benefits of soft money?
that's more of a fiscal issue, right? I forget who says it. I heard it from Gary Stevenson in one of his videos. Taxes, taxes, taxes. And so that's a fiscal issue. I feel like wealth inequality is a big, big fiscal conundrum. Yes, monetary. I mean, I said this in my Young Economist video. Like, people who are naturally richer benefit more from interest rates because they can save more and they benefit from interest rates. And then we're getting into like how should the banking system operate? Like Hayek argues we shouldn't have a central bank because artificially low interest rates cause like huge economic inefficiencies to grow up. But in that same respect, massive economic inefficiencies grow up from soft money because there's all this money flowing in the economy, and because of that, and because it causes inflation, it forces people into jobs, which causes bullshit jobs, which causes economic inefficiencies because we're just producing stuff for the hell of it.
Mm.
So
I
yeah.
mean,
But
isn't
I get what you're
always
saying. It can exacerbate wealth inequality, absolutely. But then we start talking about fiscal policies and how to patch that. And I mean, you look at like, okay, it's like, yes, soft money has its benefits and hard money has its benefits, and that's what I'm agreeing with you. They both have huge benefits. But if we can say, all right, wealth inequality can be sort of fixed with fiscal. Economic slowdowns can be helped with supply side policies, and then we simply make the economy efficient through monetary policy, hard money monetary policy. I mean, it's sort of obviously this isn't. I mean, you need to go into the details of the policy making and everything. I'm vastly oversimplifying it right now because I just want to talk about hard and soft money, but like consider the economic efficiencies brought on by hard money, and do you think that's worth the loss from soft money, which has some benefits in terms of helping the economy on paper continue, although then we're talking about how do you measure the economy, right? And a lot of it's GDP, and GDP is, most economists agree, it's completely useless.
Yeah. It's not reflective enough. It shows well actually recently seen it with America with their crazy inflated stock market and GDP growth based on infrastructure.
AI infrastructure, yes, exactly.
AI infrastructure, yeah.
Yeah, like what real output does that AI have? Very little. It's literally replacing jobs, and that's arguably bad for the economy in a soft money system, where, as I said, we need to maintain employment to maintain the flow of money, and the flow of spending and the flow of output from this employment. Although, again, as I said, how much is that output actually useful? Very little. Because, like literally, there's a joke, right? An economist dares another economist. Two economists walking down the street. One dares one to eat a pile of dog poo for 100 quid, so he does it, and then the other economist. And then they walk down the street, and then the economist who ate the pile of dog poo says to the other economist, "Oh, now do this other thing, and you get 100 quid." And like, so they've just exchanged 100 quid, so they're both net zero, and they've just eaten dog poo for no reason. But then they joke, "Oh, well, we've increased the GDP by 200 quid," and I think that encapsulates it, right? Literally, and in fact, with the AI bubble we're seeing, this encapsulates it because Nvidia gives. I forget the exact figures, but I'm sort of spitballing. But I know this is roughly what's happening. Nvidia gives OpenAI 200 billion in terms of funding for more AI research. OpenAI gives Nvidia, and then OpenAI uses this money to buy 200 billion worth of what's it called, GPUs. And so now both of them have increased their revenue by 200 billion. But realistically, all Nvidia has done is given them GPUs, and all OpenAI has done is get GPUs, but on paper, the both of them have massively increased their revenue. The same can be said for AMD. OpenAI is promising to buy 100 billion worth of AMD GPUs, and in return, AMD has given OpenAI 100 billion 10% of their stock, which realistically, with how fast the bubble is growing, and with how much money AMD is going to theoretically make with OpenAI buying their GPUs, which is going to massively inflate their revenue and profit margins, they're going to valuate up to $1 trillion plus, which is then going to cause OpenAI to, again, I don't like the term net zero because it's usually used for climate change, but literally it's a net zero economy. You're netting zero gain. All you're doing is exchanging hands of goods and resources. It's essentially a barter economy with the added benefit of being able to make even more money because you're just inflating your stock.
And then you have people just speculating on the price, and then you just see that shoot up as we have recently. Like,
exactly.
well,
that's the quote unquote benefit, which is really not a benefit, Especially when it's the rich people who own this stock. So
I was gonna say,
this is what I'm
who
saying.
actually benefits from high speculation?
Yeah, it's mostly rich people who benefit from the stock going up because they own most of the stocks. So, I mean, we talked about how hard money can cause wealth inequality, but I mean, this exact same respect, it's also soft money causing inequality.
Yeah. What do you what do you think to so you know how right now we have a so let's say we was using a hard money system, we'd be using commodities, and Bitcoin's one of the most one of the like grey areas there because it's
Bitcoin is a hard money, I would say.
yeah, definitely. What do you think to like a mix between like a hard money system but made it effectively like crypto, kind of like you know how we have gold ETFs and stuff like that. However, instead of having like physical gold, we made it into a digitalized system.
A future,
Because
yeah, a
then
future.
yeah,
Because it's not digitalized, right? I mean, obviously you can have Bitcoin gold, which is Bitcoin pegged to the price of
well,
gold.
yeah,
But like, yeah, so we've had futures for a millennia, not millennia, but you know, what I mean, a long time, hundreds of years.
yeah, like a tokenized gold.
Mm. Well, I mean, that's the thing, though. We had hard money in 1815 to 1914. I keep saying it, but I'll just reiterate it. And in this time, we still had futures. So I'm not sure what point you're trying to make, but I mean, it doesn't make commodity
Well,
futures
okay,
moot, you know?
yeah, no, I think what I was trying to get to is like, could we not like in the future have a digital gold standard? I know we've moved away from the gold standard, but could we not see like another re-emergence of it? But this time in a setting we're used to now, like Bitcoin, for example. We're never going to have a Bitcoin standard, but we've had a gold standard before, but now we could have a
See, you
digital
say
version
that.
of
You
it.
say we'd have a Bitcoin standard, but El Salvador has trialed it, and I'm not sure how successful it is, but we did see it, you know?
Oh, did
Um,
we?
yeah,
Oh, that's under
as
my
I said,
radar.
in
I
El
didn't see that.
Salvador. Yeah. So in El Salvador, they did have a Bitcoin standard, which was interesting. They adopted Bitcoin as their official currency. I don't know how successful that was. I should have really researched it. I should have had the hindsight to know we talk about that when talking about hard money. That's maybe a topic for next episode. But so yeah, I mean, in a system like we could readopt the gold standard. And the only issue being is, so for example, the pound. If we pegged the pound to, let's say, 0.1 grams of gold, because 0.1 grams
Hmm,
of gold is I believe seven
nice.
pounds, which is still insanely expensive, right? You'd have a huge economic shock because you'd have to issue new pounds, because otherwise suddenly the value of the pound has just gone up by 7 times, which is going to cause massive inflation in and of itself. So yeah,
Yeah.
or not even necessarily inflation, just a massive disparity, like what we've seen in Argentina, where the official rate and the market rate are just entirely separated. So yeah, but
Wow.
so we would see an initial massive economic shock, absolutely, especially as I said, because we measure GDP, we measure the economy by GDP, and if we're limiting consumption because of hard money, because people aren't as worried about inflation anymore, and because people are incentivized to save, you know, people aren't going to spend as much, and that's going to massively reduce GDP. But then we get into the question of how should we measure the economy? Because, as I said, GDP is sort of this farce. And I mean, you look at countries like Bhutan, they measure their success based on gross national happiness. And who's to say that isn't the better version? I mean, then we're looking more into politics, right? Do you think having
Mm,
a better economy is better than having, is worse or better than well-being? Because arguably, if you're left wing, you're going to argue well-being. If you're right wing, you might argue, you know, the better economy is going to bring well-being in the future through, you know, capitalism breeding innovation.
mm.
But I mean, that's an
Question.
unrelated topic, but it's an interesting one, right? Because we would see massive GDP drop, but overall output in the long run would raise potentially, because we're not just wasting money anymore on anything. We genuinely want to focus on increasing output. So also in that same respect, you could look at balance of payments as a better representation of the economy.
Mm. Question: is capitalism and free market synonymous?
So see, that depends on who you ask. But in my mind, I think Okay, so you ask anyone today and they say we live in a capitalist system, but of course we don't live in a free market system. We live in a mixed economy. But we live in a mixed economy. And the UK is unique in that we have like a nationalized economy. We have some nationalized businesses. The US, of course, has little to no national companies. So, but they are
Yeah.
unequivocally, definitely capitalist. But they are still mixed market because you have a government going in and regulating it and doing subsidies for certain things, taxes on other things, tariffs on very other things. Sorry, external goods,
Yeah.
which are like that's definitely not free market. Absolutely not. But in that respect, it's like, yeah. So I forget where I was going with that. In that respect, capitalism can be synonymous with free market in the way that it describes a system where private entities drive the economy. But in that same respect, free market doesn't imply government intervention. Although
Mm.
again, then it depends how you look at free market. I would say most people would agree with that. But for example, people describe Hayek as a free market economist, but in his book Road to Serfdom, he argues that the free market isn't. The government does need to regulate the free market to an extent, because otherwise you're going to have people cutting industry standards, and suddenly food is literally toxic because it increases profit margins by a minimal amount, and by the time people realize it, it doesn't fucking matter anymore. Uh,
Wow.
so he
What
doesn't
a
say
total
that. He doesn't
mess
say
there.
that per
Yeah.
se, but he does talk about government regulation being somewhat useful.
Yeah. Question: do you think a free market hard? Okay, actually, which one do you think would be more successful? A free market based on a hard money system, or a mixed market but with a soft money system?
Okay, so I mean, we're literally basically living in a mixed market with a soft money system right now. So,
However, I don't
more.
think we have an example of a hard. This is what I mean, comparing basically this
So
system
a
versus a hard money
purely
free economy.
yeah. So sorry. So a purely free market economy is what you're asking.
Mm, yeah, but based on a hard money system.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So see, that's where my gripe is that I understand the benefits of soft money, especially in relation to a mixed market economy, where the government can basically print money and use its status as being as operating in a mixed market to allow it to sort of mobilize unused sectors of the economy, right? So if for example the UK government right now felt like it could print, let's say, I mean, this is ridiculous, but it could print £100 billion and then go and use that to go. I mean, this would have massive economic effects on the exchange rate. But in the economy as a vacuum, ceteris paribus, it could print 100 billion and then go spend it on mining coal, because there's no coal being mined in the UK. It wouldn't really be
Mm.
that inflation. Sure, it would inflate the price of mining equipment, but again, there isn't much mining equipment in the UK. So, would that inflate the economy? Really, not much. It would, because people's wages are being spent, and so we're going to get closer and closer to full employment. But also, then, in that respect, they're at least producing some level of output, which will either help exports, or because the government's basically printing money to supplement it, it can just give away the coal to the wider economy. Obviously, we're not going to use coal in a net zero economy. When I say net zero, I mean emissionless. We're trying to reach low emissions. So yeah, but so that's one of the arguments of modern monetary theory, is that the government can print money to mobilize underutilized sectors of the economy, which ultimately is very much inflationless, and overall it boosts output. So that's one of but one of the things about soft money is that it can be used to increase output, but naturally it doesn't, and it requires government control, which is then it's like, how much do you trust the government? You know?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I don't trust the government. What I'm saying is a lot of the time the government makes massive blunders, and suddenly, like, I mean, this isn't the government, this is Bank of England, but the government allowed it, quantitative easing, and now the government has to pay a ridiculous amount to help quantitative tightening, which comes out of our tax money. Of course, it isn't our tax money. Modern monetary theory, which I believe in, postulates that the government spends before it taxes, and then what taxes really do is just takes the money out of the economy, because the government's already spent this money. So the government spends 1.1 trillion and then taxes 1 trillion. So there's an extra 0.1 trillion in the economy, and all that taxes has done is just negated the extra trillion we spent. Basically, to just boil it down really simply. So it depends how much you trust the government to be able to do that and not just start spending money ridiculously, which it hasn't. So clearly, but if the government starts operating on that in that idea, and we start spending ridiculously, then yeah, like I know the Green Party, for example, has recently become in favor of modern monetary theory. Zach Polanski made a tweet about it, or something like that. I think he uses Blue Sky. I don't know. And he spoke about modern monetary theory. So clearly the political class is starting to awaken to this idea. And that's what's worrying, is the Green Party isn't known for in its manifestos for being completely sensible with their spending. I believe in their last one, they wanted to increase taxation by 160 billion, increase spending by another ridiculously high figure, which is like, that would be very shocking to the economy. Although, me advocating for hard money, I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but my theoretical approach to just introducing hard money to the economy suddenly, that would also have massive shocks. So, don't throw stones in a glass house. But yeah, I think... So I sort of gone on a tangent. To answer your question, I think still a mixed economy is just better as a system. So the way we structure the economy is way more important than the way we operate the economy with monetary policies. But on that note, to an extent, I'm only saying that because I just think the free market is very dangerous and the way we have wealth inequality right now is very bad. You could make the argument we could have a free market, and the way we allow it to operate is just through taxes, which isn't necessarily a free market per se, because we still have a government. But you could have a free market that operates perfectly fine with taxes. And then in that respect, like, yeah. So this is more of a fiscal question is the issue, and is again another political question, not a monetary question. So... Okay, so I'm going to make myself give a financial. To answer your question, so I think a soft money mixed market economy works better, but only on the caveat that we maintain current fiscal rulings. Because if we had a free market with hard money and we had wealth taxes and land value especially land value taxes, it could work better. But again, is that a free market? Because then the government is operating and taxing, and that's not free per se.
Yeah. Fair enough. So, as it stands, you definitely sound like you're more in favour for a hard money approach. It's just it'd be too difficult to quickly adopt it into today's system. Anyway, would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, but I think that's the issue with most policies I advocate. For example, I'm a Georgist. I'm in favour of land value tax, but the moment you even implement, let's say not even 100% land value, let's say a 1% land value tax, the anticipation of a land value tax crashes land prices. So, yeah. Also, hang on, and just a side note, the thing about land value taxes is I recently discovered a name for it, which sounds way, way better. Universal building exemption. So you have a property tax, right? A property tax, and call it a universal, and then have the caveat that there's a universal building exemption. So you're taxing the land, but you're not taxing the building. So you're telling people you're not taxing the building, and that sounds way better in their head than the fact that you are taxing the land. Which is just something I wanted to mention. That's quite a good PR technique.
Clever way around it. Fair enough. I don't know what to say. Well, we kind of covered most points there, unless I'm missing one. From what I looked up earlier and had a look right down, I think we've covered most aspects of soft and hard money policies. Theory, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so I also wanted to talk about. I want to get your take on this. Do you think a commodity-based hard money system would work better than a cryptocurrency-based hard money system? Because the cryptocurrency, right? Let me just lay this out for anyone unfamiliar. The cryptocurrency hard money system is essentially, right, so we have only 22 million Bitcoin. Let's use Bitcoin because it's easiest. I don't necessarily think Bitcoin's the best, but it's the easiest to talk about. Bitcoin has a fixed supply of 22 million Bitcoin. So every time... So let's say, Bitcoin naturally accrues value because as the economy grows and there's more stuff in the economy, there's less Bitcoin in proportion to stuff. So you can buy more stuff with 1 Bitcoin than you could, say, 10 years ago, because there's more stuff to buy, but less, the same amount of Bitcoin. It's perfectly inelastic in terms of its supply. However, with gold can be mined, obviously maybe not necessarily at the rate of everything else in the economy being outputted, but in that respect, you don't have, in times of economic boom, you don't have crazy currency devaluation, which just makes it so people stop consuming entirely, and then there's no capital flowing, which does stop economic booms, as you mentioned earlier, as one of the drawbacks of hard money. So yeah.
What was your question again?
Do you think a commodity-backed hard money system is better than cryptocurrency? Because as I said, you can technically mine more of said commodity to back it up, and therefore you don't have complete flat deflation. And obviously, if we have reserves of this commodity, which we would need actually, we'd need a perfect lineup of this. Like every time we introduce money into the economy, we need to get more of this commodity, or we just have to devalue the currency itself. Compared to Bitcoin, where the literally the amount of currency we have is completely set and there's nothing we can do.
The only issue with that is we've seen it now. You can buy like 1/10,000th of a Bitcoin. So there is a strict amount, but would we then have to limit the amount you can subdivide the Bitcoin up then? Because then that would, depending on that, is how much flexibility there is within the market. Because as of right now, like you said, it's not completely fixed within a commodity-backed market. However, if it was completely fixed, I think it would get too congested in a sense. As in, so imagine if you're thinking it from like an entrepreneurial perspective. We've already got Bitcoin miners. We've already got people who are mining Bitcoin. And as you said, the only reason Bitcoin is going up in value is because there's now more to buy with the same amount of it. Whereas in a commodity-based census, you can mine more gold. However, the relative value of it stays the same, even though the amount of it fluctuates. So I think, as in my mind, I think commodity-backed, not a Bitcoin-backed, because I think it could stop as much innovate. I think crypto-backed system would be too slow to react to markets, so to speak, especially since it's only got 22 million. Divvy that up between, let's say, America.
Yeah, okay. Hang on. Just before you make this fallacy, so you have 22 million Bitcoin, but within 1 Bitcoin, there's 1,000,000 bits, and each bit can be transferred. So there's actually 22 trillion.
Oh, okay, that's my misunderstanding of Bitcoin then.
Yes.
I just got. Oh, okay. Well then, I was probably I don't know. I'm not too familiar with the blockchain and how it works. So
see, that's what I was about to say. So this is the thing, because of the blockchain, you can send money instantly to anyone, anywhere. So sure, you can still do this with bank transfers in a hard money system, but because of the blockchain, that infrastructure already exists, it'd be really easy to implement it. So, and anyone can open a wallet at any time, so you don't have to rely on banks to hold your money. It's just there. So that's the thing. It massively decentralizes the economy away from banks, which actually arguably would avoid things like the 2008 financial crisis, with banks having, I mean that's more of a policy issue with allowing too much leverage and not enforcing a reserve limit and things like that. But
yeah,
like with Bitcoin, you can open a wallet and it's your wallet, and as long as you know the password or the key to it, it's yours, right? So you don't have to rely on a bank, and that's one of the benefits. And of course, as I said, the infrastructure to move money anywhere to anyone already exists. And that's the huge benefit of a hard money Bitcoin system, is that it would actually be easier to implement, arguably, than a commodity-backed currency system.
Well then, yeah. Well, I think if we were to revert to, sorry, I'm walking around the house. If we were to commit to a type of hard money system, I definitely think digital is going to be the next move. I genuinely cannot imagine us trying to reduce our monetary supply down to like
To
gold
gold
stores,
holdings,
for
yeah.
example.
Especially when we like I know the Bank of England has some gold holdings once again, but we sold the vast majority of our gold holdings in 1997. So that wipes a lot
Yeah.
of our pre-existing ones off. That was, I'd say, the nail in the coffin was World War One, although we did briefly go back to the gold standard and then we abandoned it again in 1933. But the real nail in the coffin was selling all our gold, because now we have to buy it all up again, and arguably that massively deflates our currency, because we're going to have to buy gold from other countries. So we're buying gold with our pounds or converting our pounds into their currency to then buy it, which is inflating everyone else's currency in relation to ours, or more realistically, therefore deflating our currency value, which then will reflate once again once we have hard money in the long run. But as I said, the short run implementation, especially of, like, say, a gold standard, is just ridiculous.
Yeah, you don't want a deflationary spiral. That would just oof. Want the value of money to stay relatively, because this is that. I was kind of thinking of it.
Well, when you say deflationary spiral, you mean the deflationary spiral in relation to purchasing power of money.
Yeah.
In that purchasing power stops. Because when you say deflation, that's actually the decrease in the price of goods, which in terms of a hard money system, that's the benefit, is that it causes goods to reduce in price in relation to money. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, the value of the money itself deflates.
Yeah.
So it devalues more like. But yeah.
Well, yeah, because one of the main benefit of hard money is that it's so resistant to inflation decay, as in like the purchasing power.